Hello and welcome back to Project 380. Today I'm going to be taking a break from the engine and I'm going to be doing a little bit of work to the car as I need to prep it for something else I've bought for the chassis. So first things first, I've got to remove some of the interior. So I'm going to start off by removing both of the seats. This is a fairly easy step, but it does vary from model to model. This is the Mark II, so it's only held in with 4 bolts. The Mark I also is held in by 4 bolts, but one of them is in the transmission tunnel at the back. If you have a model with heated seats or speakers in the headrest, there will be wires underneath the seat, so once you've unbolted it, don't just rip it out as you're going to damage your wiring. So I'm going to do the front bolts first. To access them, just put the seat all the way to the back. And they're just 2 at the front. And then gently slide the seat forward so we can get to the back too. Nope. Now I need to get the centre armrest off, and to do this I first need to get the gear knob off. If for some reason you've got an unmolested MX5 with a standard gear knob, this is going to be a little bit tricky to get off as they are really stiff. I suggest using water pump pliers, get a good grip and twist it off, but you will damage it. Luckily I've already changed mine for an aftermarket one and it just spins off. Now the centre armrest is only held in with 4 screws, 2 at the front, down here, 1 either side, and 2 inside the armrest itself. Now my screws are already out and I've lost them, so this could come straight out. The only thing you've got to watch out for is the window switch, as there is a plug underneath it. So 2 at the front here. And 2 in the armrest here and here. I think at one point all 4 of these did have a cover on, so you'd have to dig that out before you get to the screws first. So pull the gear gaiter above the gear stick and start from the front and then pull it forwards and then unplug your window switch. Now usually there would be a big black floppy gear boot here, which is just held in with 4 10mm bolts. But in my case I ditched that years ago in place of the hydro handbrake, so I'm going to have to remove that instead. So it's just the 2 lines here, I'm going to disconnect them and then a couple of really poorly placed bolts. So I'm just going to make sure that I don't drip any fluid anywhere. I'm going to ditch these lines altogether as I'm going to be reconfiguring up the hydro setup itself anyway. And now the footrest down in the driver's footwell. And the lower seatbelt mount both sides of the car. And both door sills. If you've got the standard ones, they should just pull straight out. Now for the interior panels in the footwell. There is a panel pin right up here. Then just peel away the door seal itself a little bit and pull the panel out. With the back interior panel, you just need to prise away the door seal a little bit so that you've got a little bit of movement with the back panel. You don't actually need to remove this entirely. At the back behind the seat, there's a couple of plastic poppers that keep the upper carpet attached to the back. As you can see, I've got a couple missing. Just fold that out of the way. Some parts are stuck with Velcro, so just hold the carpet and give it a little pull. There's also a popper clip in the centre underneath the armrest. Some of you might be lucky enough to have the original floor mat holders. They need to be removed as well with a screw type plastic popper. Now there are two ways around this job. The easy way or the hard way. Obviously I'm going to do the easy way. The hard way is to remove the carpet completely. But to do that, you either have to cut the carpet or loosen off the dash and lift the dash very slightly. As right in here, the carpet is cut around a plug in the chassis that actually holds the center console in. So what I'm going to do is lift the carpet up and tie it into the center away from where I'm working underneath the car. So it's actually this bit here where I'll be working from underneath the car, and the carpet is far enough away for me not to worry about it anymore. So that is the easy and clean bit all done, but now I need to do some work underneath the car. I'm actually going to be removing the PPF and the gearbox. This step doesn't actually need to be done for what I'm actually going under the car for, but since I'm under there, I'm going to be cleaning up everything. And to do that, I am going to remove the gearbox and PPF to make my life a lot easier. So I'm going to get changed into some dirty clothes. I'll meet you underneath the car. Now to start things off with the gearbox, I want to drain it before I make a mess. And to do that, the drain bung is right at the bottom here on the passenger side, and it's a great big 24mm bung. Make sure you don't undo anything on the other side or you could damage your gearbox. Now that all the oil is out the gearbox, we can remove the prop shaft without making a great big mess. And to do that, we first need to disconnect it from the diff at the back with these 4 nuts and bolts. The easiest way to do this is with a second person. So get in a position where you can undo one bolt, get the second person to put the handbrake on, undo the bolt, take the handbrake off, spin the prop shaft and do it again. Now you should be able to wiggle the prop shaft away from the diff. You may need to give it a little bit of persuasion with a rubber mallet. And then pull it gently out of the gearbox. Once the prop shaft is out of the car, it's a really good idea to keep this bit protected. We don't want to scratch this or damage it in any way. If that does happen, you will ruin the input seal on the gearbox and you'll just constantly leak fluid. Now I'm going to disconnect everything connected to the gearbox. I'm going to start off with the speed sensor. This is different from the Mark 1 and Mark 2. Mark 1 has a metal collar which you have to twist off first and pull out, but the Mark 2 uses an electronic sensor. So all we need to do is unplug it. Now on the driver's side towards the front of the gearbox, there are 3 white plugs. 2 I believe are the reverse light switch and the other one is the gear or neutral switch. Now I'm almost ready to remove the gearbox. Remember, most of the time you'll be doing this with the engine in, so remember to remove all the engine bolts and the starter motor. If you missed that step or you need to know how to do it, go check out my video on engine removal. I'll put the link up above. Now all that's left holding the gearbox in is 3 bolts. One at the back here and 2 at the front, both holding the gearbox onto the PPF frame. Now before I undo these, I'm going to support the gearbox with a trolley jack, so it's not going to go anywhere when I take these bolts out. Now all we need to do is gently pry away the PPF from the gearbox. Now if you have got a Mark II, be careful as your speed sensor is right in the way. So if you're struggling to get the gearbox out from underneath the car because of the height, it's a good idea to take out the gear shifter itself. This is only held in by 3 10mm bolts. And then you can simply pull the whole assembly out. Be careful with this end, make sure not to scratch it or damage it, keep it somewhere safe. Now it's a good idea if you're storing the gearbox anywhere or doing anything dirty to cover the turret hole itself so no dirt gets inside. Now I want to work on getting the PPF frame off, and to start off with we're going to disconnect the wiring harness from it. It's connected in many places with these plastic tabs. All you have to do is grab a pair of pliers, squeeze the tabs together and pull the wiring harness out. Now at the diff end of the PPF, usually you would find a earth strap with an eye on the end bolted onto the driver's side of the PPF, but 9 times out of 10 you'll find this is snapped, so you'll just have to replace it at some point. Now the only thing left holding the PPF on is the 2 bolts that attaches the PPF to the diff. These can be particularly tight. Try using a big breaker bar and try and be safe. If that doesn't budge it, try asking it nicely. If that doesn't work, try swearing at it. And if that doesn't work, seek help. You're talking to a bolt. On top of the PPF, joining the PPF and the diff is actually a captive top hat. So you need to push these out from the bottom. Simply wind the bolt in a couple of turns and give it a little persuasion. Now you need to try and get the top hats out of the top of the PPF. Now using a small screwdriver or a little pry bar, we need to get the bottom top hat out. There's only one of these and that's at the front of the diff towards the engine. Now using a pry bar, slowly pry it away from the diff. Now the PPF is out, I'll give you a closer look of how it attaches to everything, as it's really difficult to see when it's in the car. So at the back of the PPF where it attaches to the diff, you've got 2 bolts and they are different. The one right at the back of the engine just has a little washer down the bottom and is the skinnier of the 2 bolts. The one at the front has the top hat pressed into the PPF As you saw, I struggled to get that out, which is quite surprising. As you can see, I've copper slipped everything, but apparently not the top hat, so I just manhandled it out. Now a closer look at the top hats at the back. As you can see, they've got splines on, so when you tighten these bolts down, they pull into the PPF and don't spin anywhere. So what you've actually got to do is knock them up from the bottom out of the frame like that, and then remove them by hand. And at the front, the two bolts are completely identical, but if you do struggle to get these bolts back in, it's actually because the top captive nuts actually can slide backwards and forwards. Nothing too exciting today, but it's all in preparation for next week, so join me next time to find out what I'm doing. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.